Hey everybody, how are you doing? I am Nikki of Nikki Hearts Cards, and I'm so glad to see you here today in this live. I know that my presentation just went live today early, so I hope that you've had some chances to look at it. While people are getting here and getting settled in, I thought I would just tell you a little bit about me and my crafty journey, and I'm sorry that sometimes this camera's a little in the way, so I may have to lean to the side. But I am trained as a women's health nurse practitioner. I worked as a nurse practitioner for 20 years. I have always loved crafting from the time that I was able to cross stitch in elementary school. I have been cross stitching and scrapbooking and card making, and it's always just been a fun, relaxing thing. Over COVID, I had the opportunity to start staying home and homeschooling my kids when school was out. And so I decided, you know what, I really want to see if I can make a crafty business out of this. So I have started doing YouTube, and I really enjoy doing YouTube videos. I am primarily a card maker these days. I just like the satisfaction that you can get out of sharing your crafty makes with people, spreading kindness, and people just love getting something handmade in the mail, whereas my scrapbooks are more for me. So I still do them, but at the same time, I am definitely prefer card making. So definitely pop up some questions. Okay, so embossing ink and powder do you recommend for newbies? So depending on what you're gonna do, I would make sure that you get a fine detail. So fine detail, let me see if you can see that in this camera. I may hold it up on my thing. Do you see how this says, let's see if we can get it focused. It says super fine detail, okay? So I really like the Wow super fine detail. I just happened to grab the Ranger one, but this one is also great. This is really helpful if you're going to be embossing things like sentiments. When you get those letters, you really need that smaller embossing powder to fill in those letters so that they don't have little spots that are missing. So just make sure you've got some fine detail, and that's the one that I would start with: gold fine detail or white fine detail. One of those two things to just kind of get your basics going. As far as the embossing ink, I love VersaFine. I love the Wow embossing ink. Both of those are great. They stay wet for a very long time. You can also use your colored ink pads. I think Catherine Pooler ink pads are really good for embossing. They stay wet longer than most, and so you can just emboss clear right over those. Okay, and then Regina says, Nikki, I love your videos. Thank you so much. That really makes a difference. What is your most favorite technique? Oh my goodness. So people ask me this, they say, what are you best at? What do you just absolutely love doing? And I really love to try new things. So I love all kinds of things. I think I primarily love die cutting and ink blending. I just really like that. I really love masculine cards. I have two boys and a husband, and so they're very picky on the masculine cards. So I like to make masculine cards, but I really just love making cards. And so if there's a new technique out there, I am definitely wanting to try it and see what I think. But I think my go-tos are just die cut cards. I love heat embossing, and I just love playing with new products. Okay, washi tape. Yes. So I saw that you used washi tape on your cards in the video. Mine always peels off by the time they are delivered. Secret to get it to stay. Yes. I just recently did an entire video on washi tape. I am really bad about just forgetting about my washi tape. And I did use these, and I'm going to show you. They are not super sticky. So this is what I used in my video. It's gold, and it's a little sticky. I mean, it would stick if it had to, but the thinner ones, look at this one. This one is not sticking at all. So my favorite way to do this is to use, and I grabbed it. Let me see where it is. I either put some media matte, which is a glue. This is a glue that doesn't dry shiny, so that if you accidentally mess up and it gets on your card, that it will definitely be okay for you. So I use this on the back, or let me grab this really quick. I take very thin double-sided adhesive. So this is a really thin double-sided adhesive. This one's from scrapbook.com, but you can get them most anywhere. I believe this is 1/8 of an inch, and you can take it and spread out your tape. Let's see if I can do this with on camera. But you can put it on your tape like this and just tear off your piece, and you've got more sticky there. Okay, so then you can peel off this piece and it'll stick. So I do that a lot. I also do that sometimes to smooth out my washi tape. See how I can smooth the wrinkles out? If you think, oh, it's a piece of tape that's not going to work, that really helps for doing that. So, and it gives it a little bit more sturdiness too. So I definitely use that often. What can you do embossing and die cutting on the same machine? Which one would you recommend? So absolutely you can. I have two die cutting and embossing machines. I have the Spellbinders Platinum 6, which do you want me to show it to you on camera? If you do, it's right behind me. Let me grab it. So it's a machine like this that has a roller to it, okay? So it does take a little bit of cranking, which if you have arthritis, you have anything like that, you may need to go to one that is automatic. This machine is an excellent machine though for embossing. I would say this is my go-to if I'm going to use an embossing folder, because it comes with all of these plates that just lay out what you need on them. I'm going to show you one. So Spellbinders is a company that is amazing, and they have, so on their base plate that goes through this, they tell you exactly what to do, which half the battle is figuring out what kind of sandwich, which is what you put through the machine, will make the best impression. And so this to me is the easiest, but it does require a hand crank, which I completely understand. I broke my arm last year, so sometimes I just need to use one that's electric. And when I do that, I use the Gemini Junior. And the Gemini Junior is a heavier machine, so I'm not going to pick it up and go grab it because it's in another corner of my craft room. It also provides a lot more pressure, so you just have to be more careful with your sandwiches, or you're going to tear with those embossing folders. You'll actually tear the paper. So you may have to add some water, or you really just need to reduce the pressure by not putting as many plates in there. What was the brand of anti-static powder and the brush you used in your video? Okay, I've got a couple of these that I love, so let me show you. Let me put this out of the way. Okay, the one that I grabbed that is my absolute favorite. So there's several companies that make this. This one is actually Cat Scrappiness. And it's got a good size brush, but the flow of the powder, let me show you. I actually got some dark paper so you can see, is very heavy. That freaks some people out, okay? And if that freaks you out, then let's go with a little bit of lighter application of paper. I prefer to do a mass amount of powder, and I'm going to show you that I can. So to put these back together, it has a little thing like this, and then you don't have to worry. Of course, I got the brush last time, and it just goes like that. I really like the Simon Says Stamp one. Let's see if I got it over here. You can do something like an embossing thing, but let me show you how fast this comes off if I brought myself a anti-static powder. I may not have brought myself an anti-static cloth. I'll just use a paper towel, but it will come off of black, I promise you. It's going to make a little bit of a mess, but it will come off. You really need your, to show you perfectly, I need my anti-static thing, but it's just powder, so it's going to dust off and be black again. Okay, so don't worry about the fact that you used a whole lot. And thank you so much that you love my cards. I was trying this time to make it pretty simple so that you could do a lot at once with just 1 or 2 items. So I hope that that helped everybody. What pattern embossing folder should a newbie do first? What's the most versatile? Okay, so I love embossing folders. I would say something that you feel like would be good for the type. So for me, I like to do some floral cards with an embossing background. I tend to do something that is like a plaid, or I really love the Mandela Circle Blooms, which is a new Spellbinder one. I can actually show you that if you don't care. Hang on, I'll show you. Hope y'all don't mind. I have to step away every now and then. Okay, so if you go on my camera on my hands here, this is the Mandela Blooms. This is a Spellbinders one. It has so much detail. And yes, I did it on black. I actually love doing heat embossing and 3D embossing on black. So this one is one that I love just because I feel like it looks great behind any type of floral card. Also, if you want to see this one ink blended, make sure that you are following me on Instagram. I am Nicki Hearts Cards, and I have done this same embossing folder in pink. And that's one of my most recent posts. So it's pink with snowflakes, and it looks so much different when it's layered with ink. Looks gorgeous. This is one of my favorites that I've seen lately. I also really like ones like the plaids that can be used for masculine cards. So depending on what type of cards you're going to make, and if this is going to be your only background, that may make a difference. Altenew makes a lot of great masculine ones. Spellbinders makes some extremely detailed ones. So if you love that detail, I feel like they do a really good job with their detail. I hope that answers your question. So April says, where do you find inspiration for card designs? I was laughing at this the other day because I was listening to something about artsy people, and I never really considered myself super artsy. I'm a scientist. That's what I do. But I think about cards all the time. If I see a color in a flower, I take a picture of it. If I see a magazine layout and I love how the colors fit together, right? Like it's a beautiful rainbow or a unique color combo rainbow, I take a picture and just keep those colors in mind. I also really get a lot of inspiration just deciding, okay, I definitely want to use pink on my card. Now I'm going to grab my color wheel and I'm going to look at my different options and lay them out and see, do I want to go monochromatic? Do I want to go something that matches that? And if you don't know how to use a color wheel, a great one to download is from Catherine Pooler. I love her inks, and her color wheel is the same as really anybody's color wheel, except it has the colors of her ink on it. And so if you're looking and you are saying, okay, well, I want to use pink champagne, then I know this goes with it. And that really helps me out a lot. So colors tend to be where my inspiration comes from. And of course, you got some product and all of a sudden you're like, oh, that flower would look great like this. Or I get a lot of masculine inspiration from my kids. Okay, what is the best adhesive to use on an embossed paper like that black one? So when things stick up like this, it is definitely difficult to adhere things to them. I tend to make very 3D type cards, so I like to use a lot of double-sided foam adhesive, which will just lift it up. You can do glue, but with all these crevices, it's really hard to get a glue to stick. So I tend to go more for something like a double-sided adhesive tape, like I just showed you for the other thing, or most of the time I use foam. That means that my cards pop up more, maybe a little bit more postage. So if you're wanting to keep them as flat as you possibly can, just a double-sided adhesive tends to work better on something that's raised like this. Love your nail colors now. And in your video presentation, that's another thing. I sometimes I get like inspired just to do my nails crazy. So anyway, y'all always see I like to do like rainbow nails and all kinds of stuff. So I figure it's more entertaining to be looking at my hands. Okay, glue dots. Yes. So what about glue dots? Glue dots do work on something like this. I use glue dots. I like them. I like them for things that are heavy, like using glue dots for ribbon or something like that I really need to stick. I tend to not use my glue dots on regular paper projects. I haven't really looked, but I feel like it's more expensive. Does that seem weird to anybody? I feel like they're pricier than just using a strip of double-sided adhesive. That may be just me being crazy, but I think that they are. And they're also kind of a pain to get off that little adhesive sheet onto where you want them at times. You know, sometimes I'm just having to mess with them when I can just tear a piece of this other stuff and get the backing off pretty easily. So just for me, it's probably personal preference. I'm not sure, but and I've always thought they were a little pricier, so I tend to save them for my really important things, but they work great. Okay, do you use your printed paper? Do you use printed paper in your cards? So I don't print my own paper, and I actually don't use a ton of patterned paper unless I am gonna do a ton of cards and all in one. Like if I'm gonna make a set of cards for somebody, I might use a patterned paper, but I tend to really like to ink blend my backgrounds or do embossing to make my own background. So with my card, kind of my thought was in these cards that we created, I'm going to put them on here, is that I'm creating my own pattern paper with this stamp. And so I don't necessarily use pattern paper that I've already bought, but in a lot of my cards, I am making pattern paper. That's kind of what I'm doing with that background embossing. To me, pattern paper takes up a lot of room in my craft room, and I'd rather have a lot of different options of background colors that I can add things to than be stuck with a specific pattern all the time. So these could have been, you know, this red and blue cardstock could have been anything, but I made it into presents. Does that make sense? How do you get a nice clear stamp on paper? Okay, so with in my video we did use the Misty tool, which is a stamping platform tool. When you're using, so this is the stamp that we used, and when you're using, this one's a red rubber, sorry, hopefully this doesn't make too much noise coming out of here. So this is a red rubber stamp. There's different types. There's red rubber stamps, there's clear acrylic type stamps, okay? Both of which, before you stamp, you need to rub them off like this. Rub around, make sure you don't have anything stuck to it, especially if it's the first time, because they almost have like a little plasticky stuff on them. So I tend to rub my hands, like really do this stuff to get them nice. And a lot of people call that seasoning your stamp, and make sure that you've got all the spots to pick up the ink that you need. Then the other trick is the Misty tool, which, let me grab it really quick. Mine's a bit of a mess because, yeah, no, sorry, there's a little delay. Mine's a mess because I've had this same Misty tool forever, but this allows you to take this same stamp and put it in here and then stamp it multiple times. Every time I stamp 2 to 3 times to get the best image, especially if I'm going to emboss it, because I don't want to miss a spot and not have that there. So this is a very valuable tool that I use every day. There's another one. For tiny die cuts and frames, what's the best thin foam adhesive? I like the foam adhesive that's already cut into strips. I believe Hefty Doodle has one. There's several on scrapbook.com, but they come in little packs instead of being on a roll. And they are, I believe, the smallest you can get is 1/8 of an inch. So if you're doing anything smaller than that, you're just going to have to cut it down. But it'll come in a pack with little strips that you can pull off. And that's very nice to use for sentiments, for all kinds of things. What type of cards do you include in a set of cards you create for a gift? So lately I have been including, I always include some birthday cards because everybody needs birthday cards. But lately I've been doing, you know, if someone recently someone has cancer or something like that, and they're going to need a million thank you cards and not want to have to buy them or want to give them something special, I tend to do it based on why I'm giving that pack of cards. So if I'm doing it for somebody who is sick and they need to send a million thank you notes, then I'm going to do all thank you notes. If I'm doing it for someone just as a gift, I tend to rotate and do birthdays. I do some thank you cards. I do some here for you cards or sympathy cards. Those are really hard. And I try to keep those to where it could be here for you because you're sick or here for you because you've lost someone. But those things are things that I think people love having in their stash so they don't have to run out and buy something, and they can just use that time instead to come up with what they want to say on the inside of the card. How do I fix splotchy results I get from heat embossing? It's usually with white embossing. Yours looks flawless. So, Jessica, what I would check first is, are you using ultra fine embossing powder? So, Wow has one, Ranger has one, but it needs to be super fine detail or ultra fine detail, something like that. And that tends to cover better. The other thing is that embossing powder, I've heard some people say that embossing powder can get old, and do a little bit worse job than it was. I think my main way to get it working well is to make sure I've stamped and I've got everything covered that I want it to stick to. And then I do a couple of layers. So I tap it on there, tap off, see if there's anything that's missing, make sure I hit that area again. And then when you go in with your heat tool, you do not want to blow that heat embossing powder off. Some embossing powder is lighter than others, and so you can blow it off of the paper. So you can come from behind the paper, and start that way to get it a little bit hotter and then go to the front of the paper. But if you take that too close, you're going to blow the embossing powder off of it. Do you double emboss your sentiments? So, no, I do not. So I double emboss occasionally, but most of the time I get a good enough impression from the first one that I don't. And if I'm doing a small sentiment, if I double emboss, sometimes it looks a little too thick, like I feel like you can't read it quite as well, but it's a great technique and I think it's perfectly fine. It gives it a lot of dimension. If I'm going to want something double embossed, I'm going to get a different kind of embossing powder. So there is a Wow Ultra High, is what it's called, and it sticks up. It's bigger particles and it sticks up higher. So if I'm going to do something that I want to be raised up like that, I'm going to grab a different type of embossing powder versus trying to double emboss it. But that's just personal preference. You can do whatever you want to. Make sure, while I'm waiting on this next question, make sure you're following me on Nicki Hearts Cards. That makes a big difference to all of us presenters. I've got a YouTube channel, Instagram. You can see a lot of my work and see what you think. But all of those things really, really help, and they're great to do. Okay, what are your best tips for masculine cards? They're hard. Okay, so here I'm going to give you my general thoughts on masculine cards because I love masculine cards. I have a boy that is a teenager and one that's a preteen, so they are extremely picky. So what we do is we keep it to pretty simple color schemes. We do oranges, we do navies, greens, sometimes some red. I have to be a little careful with my red and balance it with something. And then I tend to do geometric shapes, so triangles, or an embossing folder that looks like it is triangles or just a simple plaid, something like that. And they don't like me to do much of any glittery things, so I have to leave like the sequins and all that stuff off. I really, when I showed them these, they were accepted. These Christmas cards that I made, they kind of come from my masculine thoughts. Is that sorry, if you want to put it on my hand camera, I'll show those again. But these are, keeping your sentiments clear, keeping your sentiments obvious to read, going with a scheme that doesn't turn off, the boys. Like, I didn't do these as pink. I did them as pretty traditional colors. They do have some gold on them, which I think you can get away with. But I really like the boxy sentiments, and I was able to, do the gold around this edge. And look at the fonts. I mean, to me, of these cards, these two fonts are very masculine and would be perfectly fine. This one, maybe my kids would be like, I don't know about that one. But for the most part, I feel like these are in general a masculine thing. Okay, so it's time to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining me with this. Y'all had great questions. I hope I answered them. Make sure you subscribe to my giveaway. I'm giving away a D-Stash box with lots and lots of new stamps and recently used. And make sure you follow me. I'm Nicki Hearts Cards, and I want to see you out there on social. Come to my YouTube channel. Come to my Instagram. And just be part of my community. I'd love to have you there. It means so much to me. So have a great day, everybody. Thanks.